Hello, my name is Exabu, and oh my, how fast the time flies. A little more than a year ago, this game was just a little toddler, and now it's got 5 DLCs and it's about to rip its predecessor a new one. Panzer Corps 2 is indeed getting chunky, and so far it seems that Axis Operation 1942, I've only played about a third of it, is the kind of fast a game deserves to grow. The total number of missions in 1942 is actually lower than in the usual DLC for Panzer Corps 2, with only 17 scenarios, but so far I've found that there's very little filler. The maps are big and the missions are long, and some of them are sandboxy enough to offer really interesting options at how you should proceed in them. The second Battle of Kharkov, which is the 6th mission you see in the DLC, is very much like that, and even though I offer my solution for it, I can see that there's much more to it, and if you have alternative solutions, please share them in the comments. In other news, Hauptmann Wagner is back. Or should I say, Oberst Wagner? I don't know what he did to actually skip a couple of ranks, but given that he's gradually transitioning into a pirate, he's a very welcome addition to the briefings and debriefings. Plus, we get a bunch of historical figures. I've already seen Adolf Galland and profoundly enjoyed the Spanish Civil War veteran Panzer between Galland and Wagner. General von Manstein also shows up in an early Crimea mission. 1942 also promised to be a DLC with a new focus on the air power, and so far it has certainly not disappointed. The mission covering Operation Cerberus did push me into a new tactical environment and took some time figuring out. And finally, you may have noticed that I'm not covering the Kummersdorf mission, which is the 4th mission of the DLC, partially because it's a now typical training mission we've seen a bunch of in Panzer Corps 2, but certainly take it in any case, there are a few surprises in it, and the other reason I'm not including it here is that the pre-release version of it was kinda glitchy, it tended to crash, and then the blimps came alive. Remember Hindenburg. Right, let's look at the real battles now. We kick off with a mission that looks interesting and attractive right from the start, but is appropriately easy for the first mission of the entire DLC. Rzhev 1942 is a combination offensive and defensive map, and it tries to deceive us a little. See those encircled areas around Rzhev that you're supposed to defend and protect from Soviet incursions don't interest the Soviets at all. You'll quickly find out that the encircling units are completely passive, and you're in no rush to take all of them. So my suggestion for the beginning of the mission is to concentrate as many forces as you can in Rzhev, deploy the remaining guys in Bobrovka and south of Rzhev, and leave the northern area unmanned. So your initial task will be to relieve your troops in Bobrovka and that southern bit. You will see during this time that the Soviets will stage an offensive, trying to cross the river at Starits and Zubtsov, but their only objective is Rzhev proper, and they're not gonna care about any of the other stuff. So you'll have plenty of time to handle the encircled area in the west and in the south, at which point you go back and push the attacking Soviets back across the river. Once you've secured those river crossings, you'll have plenty of time to clear the encircled area in the north. The Soviets will keep getting reinforcements around every 5 turns or so. So stay on your toes, even though it's possible to clear this entire map. Just make sure you're careful in the area surrounding the airfield in the northwestern corner of the map. It's remarkably well defended. The cold weather is still not over, and we've got another encirclement to relieve. The real Demyansk Pocket was saved by transport planes, and we're here to ensure just that. Right, let's start with the most important part of this mission. The airfield smack in the middle of the map, you need to take it as quickly as possible. So whatever troops you've got on the northern bank of the river, don't send them to Kuvshinovo, it can wait. Ostashkov and the airfield behind it is your primary target. This is also where you should use all of your airfield bulldozers. Don't waste them anywhere else, because as you may have guessed, defending the bombers is the most difficult objective of this entire mission, and the Soviets will have craploads of very strong fighter units above those lakes, so you want to have as many fighters as possible within range there. As for the objectives on land,
land. First focus and send most of your troops to Kharkov, get a lot of strong infantry and rocket artillery. The reason why Kharkov goes down first is that it's got an airfield next to it, an airfield that the Soviets use and which, if you take it, will allow you to get air superiority in that area. Plus, the Soviets will try to launch a pretty significant counterattack. West of Kharkov, see that road bridge? Yeah. There. Kuvshinovo has no such problems, so only go there once you have dealt with the Kharkov and Ostashkov, and you have bombers and artillery to spare. Why is it that if there is Great Britain in this scenario, the map gets wide like an Operation Cerberus? Right off the bat, the entire mission is a huge aerial skirmish. You are pretty much not supposed to get any land units at all. So let me just give you a few rough brush strokes and let you use your tactical acumen in solving this big puzzle. First and foremost, turn 1. Remember, the British have crap loads of fighters with 2 and 3 stars of experience, and they're just aching to find a very easy target. You'll probably buy a bunch of new planes without any experience. They'll just drop like flies in the English Channel if you're not careful. So on turn 1, don't send out any bomber missions and be very careful even with your fighters. So my suggestion on turn 1 is either not do anything at all. Your capital ships are extremely resilient and they'll take a lot of punishment, especially since the Allied bombers are not gonna come in until much later. Another option is setting up traps north of Cherbourg and maybe, if you have enough forces in the east, Dunkirk as well. Send out a bomber so that it is within the range of a ship and cover it with at least 2 strong, well-experienced fighters that are invisible to it. In any case, the first couple of turns will be the only time where the British will be able to kind of gang up on your planes and even destroy individual units. From there on, they'll spread out trying to respond to specific threats, and it'll be much easier to destroy them one by one. Point number 2. The most difficult objective of this entire mission is destroying the British home fleet's capital ships. Even the best, most experienced of strat bombers are not gonna deal much more than 1 or 2 points of damage to any of them at any single time, and HMS York has 30 hit points. And sometimes it's not even within range, so if you want to destroy it and not have a long-winded 30-turn marathon towards failure, make sure to start bombing those capital ships around Calais and Dunkirk, which is where they live, as soon as the initial wave of British fighters fizzles out, i.e. turn 3 or 4. And obviously do have the best bombers around Dunkirk, because that's where the critical bit is, not in Cherbourg. Finally, as your capital ships move east, move your Cherbourg force along with them. The best use for the airfield bulldozers is to set up additional airfields near Dunkirk and Calais, because you will eventually be able to and want to beef up your bomber and fighter presence in that area. The briefing for Kerch Peninsula is trying to trick you. Yeah, that's right, it's about the swamp. I mean, I may not be getting General von Manstein's subtle clues, but you can't properly move your tanks across the swamp, and it will largely be a tank battle once you clear the defensive lines. Another problem is, as soon as you reach the defensive lines, a huge Soviet mechanized corps around Semkolodze will get activated and will start counterattacking through Parpach. Really just standing there and waiting for your tanks to cross those swamps is a terrible idea. So my approach is, yes, send that infantry through the swamps, but concentrate your artillery to destroy the fortifications in Parpach and actually break through in that area so that you can send your best tanks and meet the Soviet counterattackers head on. The northern half of the defensive line can wait, and you can easily encircle it with weaker units once you have dealt with the Soviet tanks near Semkolodze. The Soviets remaining in those defensive lines will largely be passive, except for perhaps the artillery, especially that 203mm gun. That'll probably be too annoying not to destroy as soon as you can. So while you gradually tighten the noose on the Soviets north of Parapach, rush your tanks east and don't expect way too much resistance. There will obviously be occasional infantry in the villages, and the airfields will be defended. In any case, your next stop is Kerch, and it indeed will have to be a stop, because the fort smack in the middle of that city is incredibly powerful and has a range of 5. So in order to avoid many losses, I keep my tanks at bay at first, and then launch a simultaneous attack to destroy primarily that AA gun just west of Kerch, so that your bombers can come in and destroy the actual fort. It's very likely that the fort still gets at least one shot, so keep your artillery at bay first. But once the fort is down, if you fought off the little Soviet counterattack from just east of Kerch, you just encircle the city, wait for the Soviet defensive lines north of Parapach to be cleared, and take the final objectives. And our last scenario for today is going to be Second Battle of Kharkov. Last but not least, I must say, because it presents us with a very unique premise. 2 huge, experienced, well-equipped Soviet mechanized corps are gonna attack Izium from the southeast, and your main forces are far behind the front in Kharkov. The Romanians will offer some resistance, especially in there, but they have nowhere near the forces to actually stop the Soviets, who will crash into Izium, and once it's theirs, they'll direct the main thrust of the attack towards Balaklava, in addition to a sneaky motorized pincer maneuver through Volchansk and towards Kharkov, and the Soviets will certainly try to cross the bridge southwest of Izium, trying to reach WWII, and that HQ tank you're supposed to protect. So in view of all of this, it's pretty clear that you should set up a bit of a fortress in Balaklava and wait for the Soviets to arrive. They will bring in very strong tank formations, so don't skimp on your ATs, but there will also be a wave of infantry, so prepare to be versatile. There is also a trick to this engagement, making it about 300 million% easier. You may have already guessed it, but it's the hill southeast of Balaklava. Bring 2 or 3 of your best long-range artillery pieces there, and you'll control the approach from Izium to Balaklava for the rest of the mission. Because of the major river right next to them, they will be virtually untouchable except for air attacks. Which leads me to my next point, and it's the flood, absolute flood of Soviet planes that are gonna come into play in this mission. You'll certainly not be able to bring in enough fighters to defend against their bombing attacks without jeopardizing your ground operations. 2 88mm anti-air guns are required, one of which should obviously go to that artillery position in the hills, and the other one to cover the defenders in Balaklava. But regardless of the AA artillery, make sure you have enough fighters to burn through all of the Soviets in the air. The Soviet attack through Volchansk and Kharkov is pretty strong, but it's not as important as it might seem, and it's enough to keep a strong infantry unit to hold off those tanks in Volchansk. Not to mention the fact that the Soviet attack there will come in slightly later in the mission, and you'll probably be able to spare some of the bombers to destroy all of those tanks. As for the bridges south of Izium, I like to keep a couple of screening units there just to block the bridges and prevent the Soviets from trying to encircle and destroy my artillery in the hills, but with enough aerial support it's not going to be too difficult to actually hold those positions and deny the Soviets access to the southern back of the river. Also, there are a bunch of camouflaged partisans between Rzhev and Balaklava, and in the southeastern corner of the map. You've been warned. And this is it for today, and as you may have seen, I have been rather delighted by the DLC so far, and I'm very optimistic about what's coming, and I'm looking forward to it. And if you do too, make sure you like it, subscribe it, share it, comment it, and now, bye.